Hello, and thank you all very much for joining the COVID-19 High Performance Computing Consortium's first webinar. I'm Mike Rosenfield from IBM Research and have been involved in the creation and operation of the consortium from the beginning. Please note, again, that this webinar will be recorded. We're honored to have Michael Kratsios, Chief Technology Officer of the United States, Paul DeBar, Undersecretary for Science, Department of Energy, and Dario Gil, Director of IBM Research, to welcome you with their opening remarks. Then Barb Helland and Jim Brazzi will take you through an overview of the consortium and its current set of research projects. And then myself and John Towns will moderate the question and answer session. We'll use the chat function in WebEx as it shows on the screen to do this, and there'll be a chart with instructions shown for those of you who haven't used WebEx before when we begin the session. Please feel free to enter questions via chat to all panelists at any time during the presentations. One of the things we really want to do is answer your questions and get feedback. So I'll now introduce Michael Kratsios for his opening remarks, followed by Paul and Dario.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining today. It's really great to be here with you virtually. I want to also say thank you to Dario and Paul and the IBM and DOE teams for organizing this event today. On behalf of the White House, we are so thrilled with the progress that's been made by the COVID-19 High Performance Computing Consortium in really a very short amount of time. By way of background, as some of you may know, President Trump announced the launch of the consortium on March 22nd at the podium in the White House press briefing room. In the days leading up to that announcement, an incredible amount of work went into turning the consortium from an idea to reality. I want to recognize the Department of Energy and IBM for their really incredible work. Our role at the White House was to provide an overall framework and platform. But IBM, DOE, the National Science Foundation, and many others were crucial to the consortium's development. I also want to personally recognize Dr. Jake Taylor, who's on the call today, and his team here at the White House for their work on this initiative. Now, the COVID-19 HPC Consortium provides researchers around the world with the opportunity to use world-class HPC capacity and resources to perform their COVID-19 research projects. Ultimately, we want to significantly advance the pace of scientific discovery in this fight. Researchers, as you may know, submit their research proposals online, which are then reviewed by an expert panel of top scientists and computing experts. Then working with the NSF XSEED program, the panel is able to quickly assess the public health benefits of the work and coordinate the allocation of the group's really powerful assets. Just some quick numbers. Today, the consortium has grown to 37 total members across industry, across academia, and the federal government. And they not only provide computational resources on some of the most powerful machines in the world, but also provide deep technical experts to help COVID-19 researchers perform complex analyses. Now, thus far, 46 active projects are up and running, and they cover a broad swath of topics from basic understanding of the virus to epidemiology to treatments to vaccines. And really, during this unprecedented time, this initiative, I think, demonstrates the best of America coming together, with would-be competitors working alongside each other during this crisis to really move the needle forward. This great country, I think, has a proud record of leading the world in high-performance computing, and we were able to quickly put this power and expertise to action. So again, many thanks to DOE and IBM for making this consortium possible, and we've made great progress in recent weeks, but no, there's so much more to be done. So I look forward to today's conversation, and thank you all for joining us. And now I'd like to pass it off to Paul.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for everyone who's participating in the webinar today. Our goal here is to increase awareness of what we've put together and increase participation, either with additional parties on the hardware side, or very importantly, have additional people submit proposals for research using what we've put together. On March 22nd, we announced a unique public-private partnership consortium spearheaded, as was described by the White House OSTP, Department of Energy, and IBM, and includes a number of different government, industry, and academic leaders and participants to unleash the power of America's supercomputing resources to combat COVID-19. Not since World War II has a group of public and private entities organized so quickly and made so much time available, in particular in this area, in the area of high performance computing, at no cost to support the community of researchers tackling COVID-19's biggest problems. Access to our nation's computing resources is essential to respond as quickly as the crisis merits. Pooling our resources has helped researchers to understand how the disease spreads in communities as conditions change on the ground. It has also allowed researchers to rapidly identify targets on the virus and within humans to more quickly screen potential pharmaceutical treatments and to develop a future vaccine. It is allowing researchers to start predicting how the virus may change as it spreads through the population. We have seen rapid growth in the consortium. As Michael mentioned, we have added partners every week. Since the announcement, we now have 37 members and over 425 petaflops of computing power. In just over 7 weeks, we have had 95 different research proposals and submitted, and currently we have 46 projects up and running. As a part of this process, we've had extremely rapid turnaround from the time that people submit proposals to the screening process, significantly faster, and we have an up and running science team, which you'll hear about further, to review projects in a matter of days, not weeks or months as typical. I'd like to highlight a couple of the active projects that's exciting in the consortium. The first one is AI-based repositioning of existing drugs for COVID-19. Obviously, a very highly topical topic. The team has built deep learning models to screen over 1,600 current FDA-approved drugs and over 5,000 experimental drugs in the drug bank for COVID-19 efficacy. And these molecules are fed into the state-of-the-art AI algorithm to find existing drugs that might be best suited to help provide a therapy for COVID-19. The second one I want to highlight is called COVID Moonshot. And this project aims to deliver antiviral drug candidates that can be effective against the virus. In 2 months, we've identified over 60 experimentally confirmed fragments that effectively target a key protein associated with COVID. And we've also been using, as you may have read, using crowdsourcing to expedite the process of designing potential drugs from those fragments and have received more than 2,000 submissions worldwide. In addition to HPC power, we also have deep learning servers in the consortium, which is helpful for this project. And we've just got an update this week that that this project has developed chemical synthesis pathways for 400 promising compounds, and 200 of those have been manufactured and are currently in testing. It's been amazing to see the collaboration of computing resources from all over the country coming together and a clearinghouse with such breadth that has never been done before. We're seeing the power of that, and I believe this model will help us to work together and in collaborations in addition to the hardware to address a wide variety of topics associated with this crisis. Thank you again for everyone who's participating today, and we look forward to continuing to support this consortium. And glad to hand it off to next in the process, which is Dario Gil from IBM.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Michael, both for the perspective you have shared and, more importantly, for your leadership in establishing the HPC Consortium. Just a few words on what we aim to accomplish today. First, let me begin by thanking you for joining us. And we have invited you because we would love for you to participate in the consortium. Your participation will help us ensure that we target the right research projects and resources and help researchers progress their projects to the next logical phase. very often in the context of experimental validation, with the singular focus on accelerating discovery and solutions to the pandemic. Second, let's continue to demonstrate and expand this groundbreaking model of collaboration. The tech industry and academia are well represented in the consortium today, and we very much desire to expand the participation of healthcare and life sciences institutions to highlight a key area. Member of the private sector, I can tell you that while many of the current members are competitors, in the context of COVID-19, we're all united, and it has been a pleasure to work together with my colleagues from Google, Microsoft, Amazon, HPE, and many others to bring the best of our respective institutions. Working with our colleagues from academia and the many participating federal institutions from DOE to NSF to NASA has been extraordinary. And that joining forces will only make our respective institutions stronger, and it's a shared win for society. So with that, I turn it back to Mike Rosenfield and Barb Helen to tell you more about the consortium, and I look forward to the dialogue.
Thank you, Michael, Paul, and Dario for your opening remarks and also for your calls to action. Barb Helen and Jim Brazzi will now take you through an overview of the consortium and its research projects. Barb?
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. I think that the previous speakers have covered quite well what the mission of our COVID HPC consortium is. We want to provide researchers worldwide with access to the world's most powerful high-performance computing resources. And as they've said, it is a unique public and private consortium spearheaded by the White House, the U.S. Department of Energy, and IBM, along with many other industries, government agencies, and academic leaders. One of the things I do want to point out, not only do they volunteer free compute time and resources, but as of this date, we have no signed agreement between the parties. And so we're doing this all without specific agreement. So let me now go to the actual website and show you, did I not do that? Show you what our web, here. Yeah, this is not it. You can see many of the statistics that were quoted in the previous talks are right here on our website. We continue to have a count of how many active projects, how many nodes, how many cores are available through the consortium. On this page, we also highlight some of the work that's being done in the projects. This is where you can apply if you wanted to actually submit a proposal to the project, and this will take you off this site to the Exceed site where you can submit your proposals. And at the same time, if we come back to the main page, we not only want proposals for people to access the researchers, but we also offer you the opportunity to join the consortium. And this again talks about what resources are available, and this is the link right here so that you could join the consortium. And one of the other nice features of the website is we have a list of all the active projects, but we've also given you the option if you want to see what a specific project is. We can scroll down. We've developed a taxonomy that Jim will talk about later. I can click on a link or select antibody, vaccine, protein design, and the projects that have been selected we're working in this area show up then in the screen. So you can select anything you're interested in. We also have a link that talks about the press and the news where they've talked about the consortium, but another important thing, a link that we have is to the blog. So one of the things that we ask people that get proposals that get access to our resources is to provide not only weekly updates, but blogs. So we currently have 3 blogs up with people describing their work. So that just gives you, let me go back. I think on the first slide, we had the URL. The URL is COVID-19-HPC-consortium.org. and that will take you, and most of the things that we're going to talk about today are covered on that website. So let me now take you back to my presentation. Okay, let me share that. And talk about, I think both Paul and Michael have identified or talked about the number of members and affiliates. As you can see, we have a number of members from industry, 7 Department of Energy labs, 10 universities, 11 companies, NSF, 8 NSF funded centers, and of course NASA is part of one of the federal agencies. We also have the ability for people to be not members but to be affiliates, and they provide a range of computing services and expertise that can enhance and accelerate the research that the proposals are doing. So they're matched with proposals, and they can go in and actually help the proposals in certain areas and help them tailor their codes for the specific research. Again, these are provided for free and help enable the rapid and efficiently execution of complex programs. The executive board is co-chaired by Dario and Paul. I serve as the executive director. We have representatives from the foundational industries, Amazon, HPE, Microsoft, and Google. Certainly, both federal agencies have representatives and academic representatives as well. We have a number of subcommittees underneath the executive board, and I'll talk more fully about the scientific review committee and matching committees. The membership and alliances committee, once you submit a request for membership, it goes to Jake Taylor at OSTP for review, and he brings it to an executive committee before we take it to the executive board. So again, here's the URL for all interested researchers can go and provide a proposal. We want a high-level overview or description. It is on the website, but proposals, we need them to propose in 2 or 3 pages what they propose to do. We're not looking for multi-year proposals. We're looking for something on the lines of 6 months. If you have a multi-year proposals, there are other options available to you, such as the NSF Rapids program, or NIH has a program as well. We receive the proposals. We get them daily, but we're actually the scientific review subcommittee meets 3 times a week. It's composed of technical expertise, subject matters from members of the consortium. They're serving on a rotating basis to make sure we have the broadest representation of the expertise as possible. And they review for merit and make recommendations to the computer matching committee. So once the scientific review committee meets, they meet in the morning, then that afternoon, the matching subcommittee meets. It is made up of all the members of the consortium, has representation on the matching committee. When a person submits a proposal, they can either request a specific resource that the consortium is offering. They can identify the type of resource they need. Perhaps they need something with GPUs or not, or they can leave it unspecified. So at the matching committee, we look at what the proposer has suggested and match it to as close, if they've requested a specific system, we try to match it to that system or a certain type. We may have several people who offer to support that proposal. So, and in that case, we send it back to the PI to select the resource that they actually want to use. And if we leave it blank, we try to make the best match possible. So what we also then, once we've identified the resource, matched it to the PI, then it's up to the facility to guide the PI through their normal onboarding process to bring the proposal so we can enable it. And I want to underscore what the previous speakers have said. We're able to do this very quickly. So instead of taking, say, weeks to review the proposals and get them on board, we're doing this in a matter of days. And with that, I will turn it over to Jim Brazzi to talk about some of the proposals and the taxonomy that we've developed.
Great, thanks, Barb. Yeah, I'm Jim Brazzi from Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and I've been, privileged to help with this effort. Yeah, it's amazing what we can do when we really put our minds to it to come together on something like this. We've had a really strong response since the website opened back in late March. With as we're going into this week, over we've really looked at over 100 proposals now, and we're moving them through this pretty fast. We have 50 approved proposals. This slide shows some of the general statistics on what we've seen so far. The rate of these coming in is maintaining pretty steadily. I think we just this morning reviewed 4 proposals in our technical review meeting, and after this meeting we'll have the matching process going on. So we've got a pretty steady activity going on of getting these things through. The table on the right shows a little bit of the distribution of the originating organizations. It's really been pretty heavily focused on university groups proposing. We'd like to see more industry participation in the process, and that's one of the things we'd like to get help with in getting this more known and engaged in that area. You can also see we are getting some reasonable international proposals as well. But again, we're very open to more of that coming in from everywhere. Just so you know what these are, the R&D organizations are national labs, NASA labs, places like that. Medical organizations have been hospital and medical systems that are not necessarily affiliated with a specific university or anything, but you can see the overall distribution there. The comment right below that is we also track projects that have really concrete plans for experimental or clinical or some sort of policy transition into practice. That's important. It's a review criteria that we use. All of the proposals are required to produce open results. The results have to be published, data needs to be released, and so on. So they contribute to the open R&D community effort going on COVID-19. But some projects actually have very explicit plans, partnering set up to work with the experimental groups or with clinical groups to actually validate, test, and put into practice the results. And we track those projects and encourage that for new proposals coming in as well. Can you go to the next slide, Barb? Thanks. This is the taxonomy of topics that we use to sort of track the overall portfolio. I have to say at this point we haven't really been doing any portfolio management on this. Our priority has really been finding really good projects and getting them compute resources so they can execute as rapidly as possible. But this is how it breaks down now. We broadly look at things in 3 areas. There's basic science, where we're looking at fundamental studies of viral structure and function, how the virus interacts with human biology, how the virus has been changing over time, environmental effects, and then some basic tools for doing these kinds of studies as well. And a fair number of the projects fit into these areas. In these cases, the products in the proposals are generally data releases, publications, things like that. Moving over to the right, our largest category of proposals has been in therapeutic development. Some proposals on evaluation of specific new targets, a large focus in small molecule design. So in areas like virtual screens, in studies of particular small molecules interacting with various viral targets and human targets as well. A somewhat smaller number looking at protein and peptide types of therapeutics, antibodies, vaccines, and other things like that. A set of projects specifically looking at drug repurposing studies. And then a project that actually I'll highlight in a moment on that it's doing sort of general technology development, supporting therapeutic development. I'll come back to that one in a minute. Then the final category is oriented projects. We have a couple projects looking at patient trajectories and outcomes, how those connect back to genomics of the patient. For example, how do you categorize patients on expected outcomes? Areas looking at modeling of medical technologies. The project we have there is specifically on modeling multi-use ventilators, for example. Supply chain and resource allocations, epidemiology, environmental studies. We have a couple projects now on social interaction analytics, looking at large data sets and tracking methods for looking at how you assess social interaction and impacts ultimately then on epidemiology, connecting back there. That's it. The patient area is one where, again, we'd like to see more proposals coming in. We'd like to encourage and we'd like to solicit help from this larger group to connect groups in these areas to get more work going on in this area, because I think there are significant computational aspects that can help with and that these resources could help with. I want to highlight also a couple examples of things we've been doing just to give you a little bit more concrete feel for what these projects are. We have a group at Michigan State that's been developing and releasing now some of the first real high resolution structure and dynamics prediction for membrane proteins in the virus. These are proteins that are typically difficult to get high quality structures from other ways. But in the complex dynamics of these proteins enable potential new drug targets. So they've been running on the San Diego Supercomputing Center and doing some very innovative new work on how you actually predict those proteins that as they're embedded in membranes. I want to also highlight one of the same projects that Paul talked about at the beginning. This is a small company, Post-Era, that's developed a very interesting and innovative approach to providing retrosynthesis services to the community. So they're actually taking molecules that are crowdsourced for proposed new molecules and using their computational methods that they've developed to develop synthesis pathways. In other words, the recipe for making the molecule. They've received a couple thousand molecules now to look at. They've actually done retrosynthesis on 400 of these, and 200 of those are actually being manufactured and tested now. So this service is actually enabling a much larger set of scientists to evaluate new molecules in this. So this is a real amplifier of capability of the community. And the computing that can be provided here, in this case through AWS, is really providing a really valuable service, I think, for the overall community. Finally, I'll mention a group at MIT that's just actually developed a new model for modeling multiple contact tracing in using bidirectional analysis of the data, where you're looking at contact tracing in both directions on the contact chain, showing that they can get very significantly improved performance for the coverage that we need on contact tracing using that. And they've just released a new publication, which is now out on medRxiv to show that. So the results that are starting to come out of these projects are quite significant. And again, we would like we need help to help connect this to these communities and to get more of this work going on. We are nowhere near tapped out on our computational resources that can be made available to this. I run the matching committee meeting every day, and there's a real hunger on the resource providers for good projects. So we'd like to see more coming in and can use help in that. So Barb, back to you.
Thank you. Mike.
Okay. Thank you, Barb and Jim. By the way, that post-era project is, as Barb showed, is talked about, is shown on the website under blogs if you want to read more about it. We're now going to use the rest of our time to answer questions, and we'll also use some of the time to get your feedback, which we welcome you to enter into the chat to all panelists, or send to Nancy Campbell after the webinar. You all should have her email address. The screen should show, shows the process for how to use the chat function. Please make sure you send your questions to all panelists. John Towns has been reviewing the questions, and John, do you have the first question?
I do, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine a couple of questions that came in because they're related. So the first question is around how can industry participate and support the efforts of the proposing projects through a variety of mechanisms. It might be access to data, subject matter expertise, or assistance. And related to that, given that many of these companies are already involved in a lot of projects internally, can they contribute as advisors to teams? So this is related to providing some technical assistance to avoid reinventing the wheel.
Okay, so I'll take that, and then I think you and Jim may have some thoughts as well. One of the other ways that industry and organizations that are on the call that can help us is by providing your feedback. You know how to get drugs and therapeutics out to patients, and we'd like you to look through our active projects, our taxonomy. Are there areas that we should be doing more work in? Are there areas we should be doing less work in? And we've sent some of you those questions. So I think your feedback can be extremely helpful in enabling the consortium to have more of an impact and be more effective. Now I'll turn it back to John and/or Jim to answer some of the questions about the other types of expertise that industry could potentially help our PIs.
Yeah, this is Jim. Yeah, I think that it would be terrific to have pharma participation, for example, as advisors to teams in this, and we could do that through the affiliates mechanism that we've developed for computing technology as well. For example, I saw that one of the questions came from Jose. Hi, Jose, good to have you on. I think it would be terrific to have people like that, helping some of these groups, because they want to do the right thing. They don't necessarily have deep experience in a lot of cases with development, and so yeah, I think that's a great idea. The other thing we can do is potentially recruit reviewers as well, and John may want to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. So I chair the scientific review 3 times a week. We are always looking for additional subject matter experts to participate as panelists. And very briefly, what someone's getting themselves into for that is a 6-week stint of 3 days a week of reviewing proposals. It's a 1-hour meeting 3 times a week to go over the proposals that have come in since the last meeting. And as Barb had mentioned earlier, we want to turn over the membership of the review committee to make sure we're getting a broad set of perspectives on the projects that are coming in, and have a robust review process, even though we're trying to do it in a lightweight manner. If you're interested or have those that that might serve as reviewers, I'll take advantage of Nancy's email that you saw earlier. If you could shoot a note at her and she can route that to me.
Okay. All right. Thank you. John, next question.
The next question has to do with access to results of the projects. Specifically, they were looking for access to some of the data that might be produced by some of the projects, but I think it's a more general question about how do we have access to results that are coming from this work.
Okay, I think you and Jim are, again, best able to answer that question.
Let Jim field it while I do other.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, we're just starting to see things like data releases and publication releases from this. I think that probably the easiest thing for us to do right now to make that available would be to get those onto the website, so that those can be seen broadly as the PIs are ready to release those. That's the mechanism I think that sort of we've got sort of within our power to get this out. A lot of the groups will be releasing these on some of the broadly used data sharing sites that are out there as well. So they'll get into the normal COVID-19 community that way as well. But I think we could specifically for these projects get those links out onto the public website.
Okay, great. Next question.
Okay, so the next question I have, I like this one. So HPC can be a conduit to develop therapeutics against COVID-19 and quite likely against future coronavirus. What could be the appetite for such approaches?
Let me take a shot at answering that. I think I understand what he's asking. I think that we're going to get by this, hopefully, and other things are going to happen, and I think we're going to want to be able to spin something like this up very quickly. There's going to be, during the phase when we're starting to recover from all this, we really want to make sure that we're prepared so this doesn't happen again with some new virus or something else. So I think that we definitely want to figure out a way and a strategy for moving forward beyond the current crisis. Dario, do you by any chance have anything you'd like to add, or did I cover it, or maybe I already covered it?
Perhaps, so in addition to that context of what we may do for the future, I think maybe the question was, would the consortium be open to exploring, not the current version of the coronavirus, version that may emerge, right, to anticipate, for example, future mutations or different flavors of things? Is that an open question? I think that's more the direction, although your broader point is well taken, Mike, and we are exploring, for example, one idea that I put out recently in Scientific American in collaboration with Avi Loeb from Harvard was the idea that maybe some notion like a scientific readiness reserves, drawing a parallel from the context of the military that engages in long-term planning and planning for unexpected events, and there's active and reserves that can be mobilized in times of a crisis, that perhaps this can be a precursor of something that could go in that direction, where coalition of willing scientists and participants, could come together in moments of crisis like we're doing right now, right? So those are two thoughts, but maybe Jim or John, could you comment on the openness to explore alternatives to the current coronavirus?
I'll comment on that briefly. I think there's two pieces of that. One is that the consortium has been focused on short-term returns, and so very much looking for results that can be made use of in 3 to 6 months or so. Folks should be aware that many of the agencies are issuing solicitations that support coronavirus research, basic research, and other development. And so those mechanisms, which are the normal mechanisms by which this is typically done, should be taken advantage of. And what we're doing should be seen as the short-term addressing of the crisis that we're facing currently, that at some point will transition into more traditional methods. Exactly what the transition looks like we've talked about as a consortium, and we haven't quite sorted the details of that out yet, but I did want to underscore the focus on short-term returns with these projects.
Okay. Thanks. Next question.
Okay, for the next question, there's a couple of questions around selection of projects, and the first one here is, do you have safeguards in place to ensure that you are covering your bases across all the most active areas of research? So I'll pass that one to you, Mike. Which is part of the point of this webinar, actually.
So, I'd like to answer that, and then it's actually, yeah, it's like you said, it's the point of this webinar is we definitely want your feedback to make sure we are covering our bases and making sure that we're, doing the right thing. As Jim explained, we're trying to enable the best projects that are submitted to us. But now, and we haven't really started any what we call project management, and so I think going forward, we would definitely be interested in your help and advice, guidance on project selection process. Jim and John, anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Mike. I think we're as you said, we've been focused on rapidly enabling projects. One of the reasons we wanted to show the sort of the distribution of projects over multiple areas is that we would like to start moving towards encouraging proposals in areas that we feel are a bit underrepresented, like particularly in the patient level areas. So I think that's a really good point. And as we go here, I think we're going to be starting to do more of that.
Okay. All right, John, next question.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions that are somewhat more pragmatic ones about the process, in addition to our selection process. But can you please highlight the requirements for project proposals, and what are the reviewers typically looking for?
Yeah, I think you obviously could do that one.
I'll field that one then. So we've on the Exceed hosted page that there's a pointer to from the main COVID-19 consortium page. We delineate what the expectations are of the projects and the PIs in their submissions. So there's a set of review criteria there. What I think we find is a shortcoming in many of the submissions is that while we understand that we're only asking for very brief documents, 3 pages, there's often some detail that really is necessary for someone who's not that PI with the knowledge in their head to understand how some of the dots connect, if you will. So often what will happen in the reviews is the reviewers are asking for, why are you using that method? We know what that method is, but why do you think it's applicable in this case? And those sorts of questions. And those sometimes end up going back to the proposers for clarification. So they're also definitely looking for things consistent with what the expectations of the consortium are, as for relatively short-term impacts for addressing the crisis. So those will proposals with those characteristics will rate high by the reviewers and come through quickly. The other thing is being as specific as you can about the resources required to conduct your work. We've had a number of proposals that have come through with poor resource estimations that the reviewers had difficulty managing because they didn't understand either how they came to the numbers that they had, or they didn't provide resource estimates, so it was very difficult for them to assess what their needs were. So those are some of the things that they're looking for, and some of the things that have come up as not being as clearly delineated in the submissions that we've seen. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jim.
No, I think that covered it pretty well, John.
And I like to let everyone know that if someone submits a proposal, if there's information that's missing, we'll ask follow-ups. We'll put it on hold and get the answer to those questions. Also, I think Jim mentioned earlier, we're doing weekly progress. We're requesting weekly progress reports once the proposal is up and running. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that we're able to get from submission through approval and enablement on a system. We do that fairly quickly. Sometimes it's less than a week from start to finish, because like we said, we're reviewing these 3 times a week, we're matching, and then the approved proposer has to go through and obtain sign the access agreement with whoever's going to provide it. So we've been able to do that quite quickly. It's not taking that much time at all. John, any other questions, or we could get to
I think we can transition to the feedback.
Okay. So let me see. So we're now going to spend some time, if any of you'd like to provide some feedback to the assembled team. If you'd like to say something, just enter your name and affiliation in the chat window, and we'll take you off mute. And we're just going to go in order of who appears in the chat window. If we complete that, or we don't, not that many people want to provide feedback, during the webinar, we'll just continue answering some of the questions until the top of the hour. And so if you want to provide some feedback now to the assembled team, just send a chat to all the panelists, and we'll open up your mic for a minute or two. We'll just wait for a few seconds to see if anyone would like to say anything. If not, John, I know we have some other questions that we can begin to answer. So, why don't we answer one more question and see if anyone else would like to say anything. Just wanted to make sure we gave people the opportunity. And again, if you don't want to say anything now, please send an email, feedback, any type of feedback to Nancy Campbell.
So you do have a request for a comment from Jose Duca.
And then, yeah, okay, very good. So John N., can you please open up Jose's mic? And then also remember, for everyone who is participating, we sent a list of questions for feedback, and please feel free to respond to that at a later time as well. Okay. Jose?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much for all the information. Thank you for taking some of the questions and for the comments. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the importance of high-performance computing and the approach for short-term. I think it's critical to do it like that, but it has to be done also with an eye on the long term. So that can be very much possible. So I think that would be my main recommendation. Think about what can be done to tackle as many targets, as many of these proteins, as many of these molecular approaches as therapeutics. You're not going to be able to make new molecules in 6 months, but you should be able to lay the ground, right? Lay the work for that to happen and impact COVID-19 and hopefully generally these coronaviruses. I think that would be the winner approach. So count on me for any help that you need. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mike, I'd like to comment on that.
Sure.
So we recognize that there are some things that will be started under the consortium and continue in other ways. It reminded me of something that the reviewers are looking for that I failed to mention earlier. It was mentioned perhaps in the earlier slides, but one other characteristic that's important, particularly for those that are looking at the basic science side or therapeutics, is there a connection from that research into clinical use or production of a drug or whatnot into the labs? And so we recognize that it's a process, and of course, not everything will be solved up front, particularly with the basic science side of things. So if there is a clear connection to the next stages in the pipeline, that will fare better in the review process.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else like to make a comment? If not, we can continue with, I know we have a few more questions that we can start to answer. John, let's do one more.
Not seeing any additional folks that want to make a comment, so I'll bring up the next question. So there's a question: is there a Slack or Microsoft Teams or other collaboration platform where we can interact with the project teams?
That is, I can answer that. That's an excellent question, and it's something that we actually discussed, and we actually have an exec committee meeting at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and I think we should talk about that, because I think if we can develop one of the main points of the consortium, besides enabling the research that we're doing, on all these our supercomputers, is to create a community around this, get people talking together. So I think that's an excellent thing that we should think about how we're going to do that going forward. And I see the comment. Yes, thank you. We'll reach out to you. Okay.
I'd also like to comment that we have just begun getting the research teams that have been provided access through the consortium together to discuss progress so that they can share results and data. And we've done that actually in collaboration with efforts in Europe to expand that group of researchers that are exchanging ideas. So that's still something we're just getting off the ground. It had its first meeting last week, which was quite successful, and will continue to develop as we go forward. They'll be meeting bi-weekly.
Okay, thanks. And thanks to the person who offered to help us with the Slack channel. We'll be in touch. Any other questions? John?
So there are some questions really about what's the process look like? How did we go from submission to having access to a system to do research? And I don't know, Jim, do you want to walk through that, or would you like me to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to start, you of course go to the website, and there's a process that's pretty well defined there to submit a proposal. We collect those. The technical review committee meets 3 times a week in the mornings and reviews those. We had a meeting this morning where we reviewed 4 proposals. Then the proposals that are basically passed by the technical review team go into the matching meeting that we'll have in 3 hours now today, and where there's a representative of each of the compute providers. We basically look at the recommendations that are made by the technical teams, match that up with the resources that are available, and end up with often if the proposer asked for a specific technical resource, then as long as compute resource, as long as it's actually available and has capacity to support the proposal, then we make that match that way. If the in the case where a PI has not specified a particular resource, then we basically allow multiple providers to propose that they could provide the resources that are requested. That information then goes back to the PI, and the PI makes the decision on which of the providers they'd like to work with. And this whole process is usually done in a day, going into that, or into the next couple days if the PI has to make a choice. So it's a pretty fast process, and that's generally how it works.
Okay.
I'll add just a couple of details there that are related to a few other questions that we have. So, first, the expectation is that there's a near-term impact. And so in the instructions to the submitters, they're expected to have results within 6 months, and allocations will be made for that period. They do have the option to come back and ask for additional resources, but that sort of forces the scope of the work to have a shorter term impact. The other has to do with how your data, the researchers' data, work, and results might be kept confidential. That is an issue that has to be addressed with each of the providers and the mechanisms and policies that they have in place to maintain that. So I can't give a blanket answer on that, because we have a variety of providers that are involved in the consortium, each with their own policies and procedures. So that's something that would have to be checked with them as the PI works through the process. As Jim indicated, you can choose where you wish to run, and in fact, that makes the process faster because it avoids what Jim described as a stage in which a number of providers will offer their resources, and then the PI has to make a decision that can sometimes cause a one-day delay. Although I think this was answered as we were going through the slides, there was a question about can scientists worldwide submit proposals, or is it limited to U.S. scientists and institutions? But you can, scientists from around the world can submit to the consortium. It is true that some of the providers will have restrictions on what projects they can support, but we have a pretty good collection of providers with a lot of options, so typically we can support most of the requests. So those are, I mixed in some questions and answers in there that were part of the process.
Great. John, I think we have one last question. Do you see that one?
Yeah, I see it. The question here is, let me make sure I can read it. Is there a plan to make the data generated from these projects openly accessible or shareable given the public health emergency? As part of the instructions and expectations to the PIs, I'm going to take this one. They are expected to share results and data publicly. We don't dictate how they do that, but we do ask that they tell us how it's going to be done. And ultimately, we would be providing links from the consortium main website to those data sets and results, so that the public health and other researchers in the community can take advantage of that work.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the things we want to think about is also how can we maybe put together a formalized process to get that information out there, maybe by using the website. So I think we've come to the top of the hour. I want to thank all of you again for participating, and I want to thank all our members and affiliates, all the people who are helping to run the consortium, many of whom you've heard are on the call now, but there's many, many other people that are helping make this work and make it a reality. And we also want to thank all the project leads that submitted and are running research projects as we speak. So to end, we want to encourage you and your organizations to leverage the consortium to help in the fight against COVID-19 and future viruses. In addition, we welcome your questions and especially your feedback, as we want to do whatever we can to continue to increase and improve the impact and effectiveness of the consortium. So again, thank you very much, and I believe we'll stop the recording right now.